"You needn't be afraid of me," the masked man said. "Whatever they've told you about the master of this house, I promise I am the dullest creature in the room." The Duke of Brakewell said it behind a plain black half-mask, in a borrowed manner he had not used in years, and watched the young woman in the doorway decide whether to believe him. He had come down among his own guests masked precisely so that no one would know him, so that, for one night, the feared Duke of Brakewell might move through his own ballroom as an ordinary man and see what the world looked like when it did not flinch at his approach. He had expected to be bored. He had expected the same painted faces wearing different paint. He had not expected her. She stood half in shadow at the edge of the candlelight, in a gown that had been turned and mended more than once. He could see the careful stitching where the hem had been let down, and a simple domino mask that hid nothing of the wariness in her eyes. Every other woman in the room had come to be seen. This one had come, plainly hoping not to be. Someone had brought her here against her wish and her judgment, and she had retreated to the wall to wait out the evening, and Julius, behind his black mask, felt something in his chest turn over that had not turned in a long, long time. "I am not afraid of the Duke," she said. "One must have met a person to fear him, and I never shall. He does not notice creatures like me." "Does he not?" Julius offered his hand. "Then let us neither of us notice him, and dance, and be revenged upon him by enjoying his ball more than he ever could." She looked at his hand a long moment. Then, to his surprise, to her own surprise, she laughed, a low startled sound, and put her fingers in his, and the Duke of Brakewell led a poor relation in a twice-mended gown out onto his own floor under the blazing chandeliers and discovered that he had forgotten, until this exact moment, what it felt like to be glad. Her name, she told him as they turned, was Cornelia, and she would tell him no more than that, for she said a masquerade was the one place a person without a fortune might be only herself and not her circumstances, and she meant to keep the privilege the whole night through. He honored it. He told her nothing of himself either, only that he was a guest like her, which was the truest lie he had ever spoken, and they agreed between them, laughing, that they were two nobodies who had wandered into the wrong house, and would make the most of it before they were found out. She danced lightly and badly and did not care, and he, who danced perfectly and had not cared in years, found her not caring more charming than any accomplished grace he had ever partnered. When the figure of the dance separated them, she came back to him, each time with a small relieved smile, as though half afraid he would have vanished. Once, when the music brought them close, she confessed in a whisper that she had not danced since her mother died, that there had been no occasion to and no one to ask, and that she had been certain, coming here tonight, that she would spend the whole evening watching from the wall and counting the candles to pass the time. And instead, she said, looking up at him through the eye-holes of her mask, "I am dancing with the kindest stranger in England. It is the sort of thing that happens only behind a mask, I think. Tomorrow I shall be a poor relation again, and you shall be whoever you are, and we shall never know each other in the daylight. But tonight we are equals, and I mean to remember it always." He felt the words go into him like a blade, for he knew already that he would not tomorrow take her, and he could not yet tell her why. He only held her a little nearer through the turn, and resolved that whatever it cost his pride or scandalized his county, this was the last night Cornelia would ever count candles from a wall. When the music ended, they did not return to the wall. They walked instead along the candlelit gallery, where the great portraits of his ancestors looked down, his own grim face among them, though she did not know it, and she told him, behind her mask, in the safety of being no one, things he suspected she had never told a living soul. That she lived on the charity of cousins who let her feel the weight of every meal. That she had been brought tonight only because a footman fell ill and a fourth was wanted in the carriage, and that her cousin had warned her on the step to keep to the wall, speak to no one, and on no account embarrass the family by drawing the Duke's eye. "As if I should ever dare," she said, with a wry tilt of her chin that he found he wanted to look at for the rest of his life. As if the Duke of Brakewell, who they say has refused every great match in 3 counties, would so much as glance at a girl who darns her own gloves. She lifted her hand. He saw the careful stitching across one fingertip and his throat tightened. "But I have had the most wonderful evening regardless, sir, and I owe it entirely to you, and to the great good fortune that you are a nobody too." "Cornelia," he said her name carefully, as one sets down something precious. "If I were not a nobody, if I were a man of some consequence, would that change what you have told me tonight?" Something crossed her face. "It would change everything," she said quietly. "A nobody may speak to a nobody, but I have learned what becomes of girls like me who forget themselves with men of consequence. They are reminded cruelly and in public, and they do not forget the lesson twice." She drew her hand back gently. "So I am glad you are nothing at all, sir. It has let me be brave for one evening. Pray don't spoil it by being grand." He could not speak. He, who had 100 ready replies for every drawing-room in England, stood mute before a poor relation in a mended gown, because she had just told him, without knowing it, exactly the price his rank would cost them both, and exactly why she would flee the moment she learned the truth. The great clock at the gallery's end began to strike. He had forgotten. At the stroke of 12 the masks came off. It was the rule of the night, his own steward's clever notion, and he had agreed to it weeks ago without a thought. Around them, through the open doors, he heard the ballroom rising into laughter and gasps as faces were revealed, identities confessed, the whole bright game of the masquerade collapsing into who everyone truly was. And Cornelia, hearing it too, went very still, and her hand rose toward her own small domino mask, and he saw the moment she remembered that he would unmask as well, that the nobody beside her was about to become somebody, and that whoever he was, the spell of the evening was ending. "Wait," he said. But the clock would not wait. It struck on, slow and inexorable, and at the wall behind them a knot of guests had turned, peering down the gallery, and he heard a voice he knew, her cousin's, sharp with sudden alarm, say, "Cornelia." "Cornelia, who is that with?" and break off in a gasp as the woman's eyes found the figure beside her poor relation and began, even masked, to recognize the only man in the county who stood so still and held himself so. Cornelia's fingers were on her mask. She lowered it. Behind it her face was pale and lovely and braced for the worst, lifted to his, waiting to see what manner of man she had been so foolishly happy with, waiting, he understood, to be reminded cruelly and in public of her place, exactly as she had been warned she would be. The 12th stroke fell. The Duke of Brakewell reached up and took off his own mask. He watched her understand. He watched recognition move across her face like cold water, the color draining, the wry brave light going out of her eyes, and then, worse than anything, the small composing of her features into dignity, the straightening of her spine, the readying of herself to be humiliated. She knew his face. Everyone knew his face. It hung above them on the gallery wall. She had spent the whole golden evening confiding in the dear Duke of Brakewell himself, telling him she darned her own gloves, telling him no man of consequence would ever glance at her, and now the floor of her one perfect night was opening beneath her feet. "You," she whispered, "you are—" She could not finish it. She took a step back, toward the dark end of the gallery, toward escape. "Forgive me, your grace. I did not. I would never have presumed. I will go at once, and you need never." Cornelia. He did not move toward her. He knew better. He stood where he was, and he did the one thing his rank had never once required of him, and which he found he wanted to do more than he had ever wanted anything. He bowed. Fully gravely, the bow a man makes to a woman he honors, there in the candlelight before the whole craning gallery and her white-faced cousin and 100 staring masked and unmasked guests, the bow of the Duke of Brakewell to a poor relation in a twice-mended gown. The gallery fell silent. "You said," he murmured, straightening, his eyes on hers and on no one else in the world, "that it would change everything. if I were a man of consequence. You were right. It changes everything. He took one step toward her, slow, asking. It means that when this man of consequence tells you he has not, in 10 years of every great match in 3 counties, felt for any of them what he has felt for you in this single hour. There is no one above him who may forbid it, and no one beside him whose opinion he is obliged to weigh, and not one soul in this house, your cousin least of all, who has the smallest right to remind you of any place, but the one I am asking you to take, which is beside me. He held out his hand again, exactly as he had at the start of the evening, the same hand, palm up, asking. I was never a nobody, Cornelia. I am sorrier than I can say that I let you believe it. But everything else I told you was true, and the truest thing of all I am telling you now, before all of them, so that no one may ever say it was done in a corner or taken back in the cold light of morning. Stay, not at the wall, here, with me. Her cousin made a sound. Julius did not so much as glance at her. He was looking at Cornelia, who stood at the dark edge of the gallery with her mask in her hand and tears standing bright in her eyes. 12 strokes fallen and the spell of the night supposedly broken, and not broken at all, he saw now, not broken in the least, only made real. They will say you might have anyone, she said unsteadily. They will be right. He smiled, and it was not the feared Duke's smile. It was the smile of the nobody she had danced with. And I have chosen the only one I want. Come and dance with me, Cornelia. The masks are off now. There is nothing left to be afraid of. For a long moment she did not move. Then she crossed the candlelit floor, past the staring guests and her speechless cousin, and put her stitched and mended fingers into the hand of the Duke of Brakewell, and let him lead her back out beneath the blazing chandeliers, not as a poor relation kept to the wall, but as the woman the master of the house had chosen before them all. They danced again, badly and lightly and not caring, and this time when the figure of the dance parted them she came back to him without that flicker of fear, because she knew now he would not vanish. You said, she murmured, as they turned beneath the chandeliers, that tomorrow I should be a poor relation again. I find I no longer believe you. I am beginning to think you have a great deal to answer for, Your Grace, in the matter of upending a girl's whole notion of how the world is arranged. Then let me answer for it, he said, every day for the rest of our lives. You told me a mask was the one place a person might be only herself. You were wrong, Cornelia. I mean to build you a whole life in which you never need a mask again, in which you are only yourself, and that self is honored in the daylight and before everyone. And she laughed, the same low startled laugh he had drawn from her at the very start of the evening, and he understood that he had been searching 10 cold years for that exact sound without ever knowing what he was listening for. The Duke of Brakewell, who had put on a mask to escape being himself for one night, had taken it off to become, for the first time, entirely himself, a man glad, a man chosen, a man in love. He married her before the spring, and to the end of their days, on the anniversary of that midnight ball, he would lift her stitched and mended fingers to his lips and tell her the same thing, soft against the candlelight. At the stroke of 12, he would say, I lost a mask and found a wife, and I have never once, in all the years since, mistaken which of the two I would rather have kept.